Today's video is sponsored by Skillshare, more on them later. Now I've been playing around recently with the Viltrox 23mm F1.4, specifically for video. Now this is an APS-C lens. It's pretty tiny, nearly the same size as the Sony 25mm F1.8. Has a filter thread of 52mm, really nice smooth focus ring, and a declicked aperture ring. Now it is a 23mm f1.4 APS-C lens, which is the equivalent of a 35mm. Now I shoot with the 24mm G Master, which is also an f1.4, on the a7 III quite frequently in crop mode, which is the equivalent of a 36mm. Now that lens costs $1,400, but it's also f1.4, much like this, so it got me thinking, how does a $1,400 lens compare to a $300 lens, which is pretty much the same in crop mode? So I went out and shot a bunch of different video, whole different clips, and that's mostly what you're gonna see in today's video. I'm gonna give you a bunch of different examples showing you how both lenses compare. We're using the 23mm on the a6100 and then the 24mm in crop mode on the a7 III. And I tried to get as similar of a shot as I can using this thing. I'll pop a link down below in the description if you're interested, but it lets you put two cameras right next to each other and it's pretty good for comparing cameras and lenses. Everything is shot in 4K and I matched the exposure from each camera using the camera's exposure meters. Tried to keep the settings exactly the same where I could. Sometimes there's a little bit of a shutter speed difference, but a tiny amount you probably won't even notice. Colors were kept the same, both were just standard, contrast -1, saturation -2. Other than that, just straight out the camera, standard color, not a picture profile. So let's go over what I found and my observations, and remember all this is based on video, no photo today. Now the biggest thing that I was wondering about is the autofocus, probably you were as well, and for the most part it's fast. Probably one of the fastest that I've seen on a third-party lens, albeit it is quite loud. It almost sounds like a quiet crunching compared to the near-silent focus on the 24mm G Master. Here's the sound right up close just for comparison so you can see how loud it is. The way that both lenses focus is a little bit different. The 23 is more like a bam, focus, whereas the 24 is like a smoother, steadier focus, and I personally prefer it. It looks a bit nicer. There were actually a few times where it struggled, but not much. And then there were actually times where it was quicker than the 24mm G Master, believe it or not. I don't know how that's possible, but it did happen. So it is a little inconsistent, but in general, for a $300 lens here, I'm pretty impressed. Here's a few more tests for you to see.
How about the autofocus up close, if it gets this close? Out of frame. Another autofocus test. Out the frame. Back in the frame. How does it handle it? A bit closer. We'll get this boat as well in a second that's coming up here. That one.
Now, I was under the impression that the a6100 and the a7 III had the same color science, Sony's newer color science. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's at least what I thought. But anyway, on the Viltrox, it is a lot more saturated, and I'm not a huge fan of the saturation. Now, bear in mind I had both cameras set to -2, and they still look really saturated on the Viltrox. So, is what it is, but here's some more examples for you to take a look at. Now, even though the settings on both cameras were exactly the same based off of the camera's exposure, the Viltrox appears darker or more contrasty in nearly all the shots, in fact. Now, I don't know if this is characteristics of the lens or just because of the angles that the camera's on, because they were a slightly different angle to get the same field of view, maybe the light. I don't really think that because in nearly every single shot it's the same. So I kind of think it's more a characteristic of the lens that it is just a bit more contrasty, which is entirely possible. Before we go any further, let's talk about Skillshare. A couple of courses have popped up on Skillshare recently that I think you'll be pretty interested to take because they are by people that you very likely know. Now, if you're not aware, Skillshare is an online learning community for creative people like you and I. Courses are available when you are, so if you have a spare hour or you're on your lunch break and you want to jump on and learn something to your heart's content, you can do so. There's also no ads to sit through, which is always nice, and it's decently priced too. An annual subscription works out to be less than $10 a month. So the two courses that I want to tell you about are, one is by J.R. Ali. I'm pretty sure you'll have seen some of his work on YouTube. Some amazing travel videos with some insane visuals. He has a course on how to create an enthralling intro and pretty much covers the entire thing, from planning, shooting, editing, visual effects, sound, the whole lot. The entire class is just under an hour and a half, and it's really interesting to watch how someone else approaches doing something. And then the other course is from Benny, part of Team Overkill, Hugh Nawson's YouTube channel filmer. He has a quick and simple 20-minute course covering their whole process of how they approach and edit a vlog. They've shot over 300 vlogs, so I think it's safe to say they've perfected the process. It's packed with info, and as it's only 20 minutes long, it's another one you should check out, especially if you're new to editing or you want to speed up your process. Both courses are linked down below if you want to check either of them out or both of them. And for a limited time, if you use the link down there in my description, you will get a free trial of Skillshare Premium membership. All right, let's get back to the lens tests. So the sharpness on this Viltrox is surprisingly impressive. In nearly all the shots I grabbed, just at 100%, it's pretty hard to differentiate the difference in sharpness. Even if you zoom in, it's pretty hard to tell sometimes. There was one shot that I grabbed of a yellow flower that I'm gonna put over the top here now that was instantly obvious to me that one was sharper than the other, and it was of course the 24mm G Master. There was actually a couple of shots where the Viltrox appeared a little bit sharper in some of the darker areas, but I think it's got more to do with it being more contrasty, and the blacks are just a bit blacker, they're a bit more defined. I don't actually think it was sharper. There was another shot I grabbed peeking through the trees here, which shows how the lenses handle flaring. Shine directly into it. The 24 definitely handles it a little bit better, but it's not a huge difference. Whichever way you look at it, even though it doesn't do as well, we're talking about a $300 lens versus a $1,400 lens, so it performs a lot better than I thought it would. Chromatic aberration or fringing is where we see little bits of purple creep into the image in brighter areas. Now this was interesting, and I don't know if having the 24mm G Master in crop mode has anything to do with it. Maybe it does. But both lenses have symptoms of this, especially when we look at the water and a little bit of the white areas of the water. But again, the Viltrox coming through strong and holding its own in comparison to the 24mm G Master. Bokeh is a lot of personal preference, how those bokeh balls look. Some people like them one way, some like them another way. I'll let you be the judge of that, but here is examples of both of those. And I'll be honest, I can't remember all the settings, and if I kept those little stupid Sony XML files, then I'd know, but nobody keeps those, let's be honest. All I know is that everything was the same in terms of aperture on both lenses. So that's everything that I tested. What do you think? Let me know down below, very interested. Personally, I feel like if you need a 35mm equivalent video lens for full frame or APS-C and you don't want to break the bank, this is a solid option, seriously. It held up so well to the 24GM in crop mode, it really does make you think. There's a link down below. If you want to give this a bash, while you're down there, you can bash on the subscribe and the like button if you will be so kind. See what I did there? That was good, wasn't it? All right, I think we're done. I will see you guys in the next video. Appreciate you watching. Take care. Today we're not comparing these two lenses, but they're nearly the same size. Look at that. They're nearly identical, actually. Let's take that. Let's take that little that thing off. Why have I forgotten what that's called? Step-up ring. Jeez. To give you an indication, and honestly, they feel like the same weight. Are they just the same lens? Why am I still talking? I have a hard time sometimes depending on what hat to wear. I quite like the green and black look, but then I feel like the little brightness on that is just too much. And then I was like, oh, let's go with that hat today. But then it looks like I'm just straight out of boot camp in the army. Good old Nixon. I think I want to get my own hat made. Just like a black one with just a tiny little CV on there, just tiny. I wear a lot of hats in videos, and so does everybody else on YouTube. But you want to know the reason why? Because I hate doing my hair when I don't have to go to work. I just like to get up, throw a hat on, and that's it, good to go. This is by far the best drink that you can get, and it's 0 calories. Bubbly. Let me tell you a story about bubbly. So last year when we were at the cottage, we were talking about this and how it's endorsed by Michael Bublé, because obviously he has a similar name. And then the next day, guess what appears in my Instagram ads? Bubbly by Michael Bublé. And they tell us that they're not listening.